Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. The Obi Wan Kenobi TV series is somewhere on the horizon, and there are rumors of the return of Hayden Christensen as Darth Vader. Not only will it be amazing to see these two famous characters come together once again on the big screen, we'll also be taking a look at a period in Star Wars history that has only been recently rediscovered by the Disney canon. This has rekindled my desire to know what exactly is going on with Darth Vader during this period of time. Now, ever since the duel on Mustafar, we've only seen glimpses of Anakin outside of his suit of armor. There was that time when Ahsoka Tano damaged his helmet during their duel on Malachor. We kind of also see him submerged in a bacta tank in Rogue One at his secret hideout on Mustafar. During episode 5, we see him emerging out of his meditation chamber, a safe, pressurized place in which Vader oftentimes roamed around on his little stubbies. And so aside from the end of episode 3 where we see Anakin's damaged body being operated on, we the audience forget what a mess Darth Vader is inside of that suit of armor. Obi Wan Kenobi cut off both of his legs around his knees and much of his left arm. Anakin was so close to the lava flow that the heat of the air ignited his body, causing 3rd, 4th, maybe even 5th degree burns across most of his body. This most likely caused further damage to his internal organs, including his respiratory system. It's a miracle that he didn't die from this ordeal, and somehow the fires on his body just put themselves out. When Anakin was rescued from Mustafar by Palpatine and his shock troopers, he was taken to the Grand Republic Medical Facility, which I heard has an excellent burn unit. But during this whole process, Sidious treats Anakin like any Sith would treat another Sith. He doesn't give Anakin any painkillers or tries to sedate him. There's no bath or other magical liquid to stabilize and soothe his burns and wounds. They don't even cover his burnt body from Coruscant's famous acid rains. Instead, Palpatine's medical droids bring him straight to the operating table, begin picking the pieces of cloth that have been burnt into his charred flesh, and then entomb him in a cheap and stiff Duraplast suit. Apparently, one of the bigger complaints that Vader had about the suit was that the part where the cybernetic limbs met with the stubs were not well fitted and very uncomfortable. Now, one of the biggest questions that a lot of fans have about Darth Vader's transition is, did it actually make him weaker than when he was a Jedi and had all of his limbs intact? That's kind of what I want to take a look at today. The pros and cons of Anakin Skywalker getting trapped in that Darth Vader armor. Even in the Star Wars universe, where medical technology is extremely advanced, Darth Vader's gruesome injuries probably resulted in a pretty grim prognosis from his droid doctors and Imperial Dr. Silo, who specialized in cybernetics. One of the main issues that Darth Vader faced was the fact that his respiratory system was compromised and no longer functioning at full efficiency. The main reason this happened was because superheated air and ash burnt the inside of his lungs, and so Vader's armored suit actually functioned as a life support unit. It was completely pressurized, and a ventilator and an air pump were what allowed him to breathe. I mean, without this system in place, Vader could still sustain his own life by using the Force. But then again, some rumors say even with his armor's life support, Vader still had to use the Force to keep his body from completely failing. Which is kind of insane that it actually distracts Vader from doing other things and keeps him occupied within the Force. The suit also prevented Darth Vader from using Force lightning effectively because it could damage those essential systems on his suit. We also have to remember that Vader suffered other injuries to his other organs, and many of them were also being supported by cybernetics and barely functioning. The burns to his body were so great that there was even scarring on his bones. Now obviously, Emperor Palpatine saw Vader's injuries as less than ideal. When he had wooed the Chosen One over to the dark side, he had expected Anakin to bring more limbs with him. Seeing Vader as the way he was now probably gave Palpatine some second thoughts about the long-term viability of his new apprentice. There are also some individuals who believe that when flesh is taken away from the body, then the midichlorians in those areas also disappear from the body, making an individual's connection to the Force much weaker. Also, Darth Vader's suit was not designed very well or made out of the most advanced or best materials. It was found that most of the parts in his armor had been repurposed and were pretty standard and not even made out of especially durable or light materials. There was obviously the time constraint given to the medical team performing the life-saving surgeries on Vader, which forced them to hastily construct the suit of armor. One of the medical droids operating on him, DD-13HK, speculated that there was a budgetary constraint and lack of special equipment because Palpatine specifically ordered them to do so. This was in order to limit the power and strength of Vader. I mean, all throughout his surgery process, we see this contradictory information. On one hand, Sidious was trying his best to sabotage Darth Vader's recovery, but at the same time, he authorized several arcane Sith healing techniques to keep him alive. I guess there's a really thin line on keeping your apprentice alive and making sure that he's not too powerful so that he can overcome you and take over your empire. Because of the suit's heavy and antiquated design, Vader had a lot of issues relearning how to fight with a lightsaber. Prior to his injury, Anakin had mostly used Form 3, like his master Obi Wan Kenobi, and Form 5, Shen and Jimso. Form 5 luckily was more about power and heavy striking, unlike Mikasi, which was more about finesse, or Ataru, which was more about mobility and agility. So it wasn't impossible for Vader to modify Form 5 to suit his new suit of armor. Still, it was during this transitional period that Darth Vader and Legends almost lost several duels to relatively low-skilled Jedi survivors. Vader was basically limited to very powerful overhead vertical strikes. He couldn't really move his arms around that much at all, so it was pretty easy to telegraph his movements. Now, there's an old saying that I'm sure the toxic Sith would repeat to one another during training sessions, and that's what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But in the case of Vader, not only did his injuries not kill him, but they definitely also made him a lot weaker in many ways. While Vader's transformation filled him with grief and anger, two valuable fuels for the dark side, there was one great fear that Darth Vader kept hidden deep within himself, and that was his past. He refused to dwell on it at all because he would realize that all these terrible things that have happened to him were self-inflicted. For those few individuals who really knew Vader, like this Igor-looking mofo who changed and cleaned his bacta-tank, they would describe Vader as a self-loathing individual who understood that he was a monster. The possibility of redemption through his son, the possibility that such a redemption would end his suffering is why I ultimately think Vader not only sacrificed his life for Luke, but also willingly went to his own death. The fact that Anakin would eventually lose the will to live is something that Palpatine never really saw coming, and that's because Palpatine's a bit toxic and doesn't believe in mental health issues. So we have all these negatives, now let's talk about the positives. Remember, we're not dealing with some Jedi or normal individual. Before Anakin Skywalker suffered that terrible injury on Mustafar, he already went under a transformation to become a Sith Lord. The Sith naturally feed off of emotions in order to increase their connection to the Force. And the most primary emotions that they like to use were fear and pain, which they would turn into anger and hate. That meditation chamber that Vader uses occasionally, well, that's where he allows his pain to turn into more hate. Yes, he dwells on the pain of losing Padme, the pain of betraying all of his friends, the pain caused by the neural connections that run from his head to his new limbs. There's also the pain of his phantom limbs and the pain of his scarred inner organs. I mean, just because the operation stabilized Vader doesn't mean all of his nerve connections no longer work now. All of this pain gets compounded into a super dense block of pure and unrefined hatred, which is how Vader just powers through individuals heavily wielding the Force like it's an unlimited fountain. Anakin Skywalker didn't die in Palpatine's office when he cut off Mace Windu's arm. He died when he was burnt to a crisp on Mustafar. Not only has he become emotionally distant and full of anger, Anakin now is also physically distant from everyone around him. No one really knows his true identity and just saw him as some terrible dark side enforcer. He has no friends, he has no confidence, he has no loved ones. The only people he really talks to are the officers and stormtroopers that he works alongside. And with these individuals, he keeps it very short and professional, until he's choking them out, that is. Vader would embrace his new reality, though. He understood that such isolation and detachment from people around him would allow him to perfect his spirit and allow him to focus on only increasing his connection to the Force. Darth Sidious always knew that Anakin Skywalker had doubts about joining the dark side. He had these old attachments to friends and loved ones and morality. Losing all of those connections and becoming Darth Vader is what actually pushed Anakin mentally to the dark side completely. Now back to the Vader suit, we've listed a lot of disadvantages. And we still didn't mention a lot of the more disgusting things he had to deal with, like eating and going to the bathroom. We actually do an entire video about that. It's kind of weird. But even Palpatine admitted that Vader's new cybernetic limbs made him supremely powerful. I mean, sure, they weren't that advanced, but they were far stronger than the meat sticks Anakin used to have. I mean, just look at how powerful Grievous was, and he didn't even have the Force with him. And so, augmented with the Force, Vader could still zoom around very quickly at inhuman speeds, but at the same time weigh as much as a pickup truck. And even though he was probably using the Force to maintain his vital signs somewhat, he had this unlimited access to the Force because of all that anger and pain he held within his armor. I mean, before, Anakin did use his anger to break down opponents' defenses, but now, as Vader, the weight and size and amount of anger he had made him much deadlier. It said that if you were actually able to stop Vader's overhand power strike, the Earth would move a little bit beneath your feet. Also, Vader lost everything during the transition of Order 66. Emperor Palpatine effectively cut him off from everyone he knew. And so Vader almost doubles down on his loyalty and allegiance to Sidious, because otherwise all the things that he destroyed and lost would have been for nothing. If anything, Darth Vader's transformation into his suit solidified his loyalty. If Anakin had still been that young, charming, and handsome individual he was before Order 66, first, there would have been no hiding that he was a former Jedi, which would create some issues and controversy, and two, he most likely would have rebelled a lot earlier, which definitely would not have been a good thing for Palpatine. So in many ways, the transition of Anakin Skywalker to the dark side is not a simple, positive or negative change. It's more of a lateral change from Jedi to Sith. Had Anakin still been a Jedi and burnt to a crisp, I think he would have faced some serious problems. But as a dark side user, all that pain and anger and the loss of his limbs actually does fuel him and make him a better Force user. So let me know in the comment section below what you think. Did Darth Vader's transformation make him stronger or weaker? Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.